Look at the next shortcut, which is creating connections. Now, one of my ideas in writing the book about shortcuts was these were productive shortcuts, not cheater shortcuts. You know, because some people said to me, well, shortcuts aren't good, especially when you're talking about quality. You know, you don't want to take shortcuts. Well, I know when I grew up in Georgia, we took a shortcut through the woods to get to school. It was a very productive shortcut. We could sleep later. We could stick to our breakfast eating. You know, it was safe. It was fine, but it was a good shortcut. Kept us off busy roads, actually. So what I'm going to suggest here is to do things you're already doing and add an engagement component to them. Rounding. Raise your hand if you're rounding on a regular basis. I know you are, yeah. And whether you're in an office setting or a clinical setting, it doesn't matter. I'm sure you're out rounding. So let's talk about this. When you are rounding, a lot of times when I ask people, do you round on patients or staff or both, they usually always say both. And so I said, well, when you're rounding on staff, what do you do? Well, I check in, I say, hey, I kind of look around, I see how things are going. So you're kind of doing the breeze by. You know, you're checking out the visual, and maybe you say, how's everything today? And sometimes you hear something, sometimes you don't. That would be sort of a laissez-faire kind of rounding. Well, if we're trying to increase consistency and decrease variability, it would be a good idea to have some more specific questions. Again, whether your rounding is with someone sitting at a computer at a desk or someone more in that clinical setting. So I'm going to suggest that first of all, if you want a high reliability, from what Jean Marie said earlier, you need to be mindful about rounding. You got to be in the right mood, you got to be in the right mindset, and if you're doing it because it's something to check off a box, everyone's going to know that. So you have to really have your heart into it, the emotional connection there. You want to have some standard questions that you're asking the staff. Now, I know some of you have those standard questions, but instead of me running around, somebody shout out a few standard rounding questions for staff. Yes. Do you have the tools and equipment to do your job? Another one. Louder. What's going well for you today? Pardon me? What areas do we need to improve? Have you eaten lunch? Have you gone to the bathroom, right? Is there anything I can help you with? Do you ask that there are people that are doing a good job that we could recognize? Anybody I need to recognize? Question? Anybody ask that one? That's another one that's on there. So I'm suggesting that you ask a very specific question related to someone's level of engagement, and I call it the traffic light check-in. So imagine now you've addressed this with your team already. This isn't something you go back and you do tomorrow. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. But you're asking the question, how satisfied, energized, and productive are you today based on a traffic light or like a pain management scale? You can see the happy face, sad face, middle face. So I'm either very satisfied and energized, I'm moderately, or I'm not. Now that's interesting in and of itself, but you want to find out then what's going on. Oh, I'm having a green day. Wow, how come? Because of the team I'm working with. Because we haven't gotten all our admissions yet and everything's quiet, or whatever the reason, right? But you start to get some information from that. I'm having a red day. Well, why is that? Then the follow-up question, if someone says they're red or yellow, what are you doing to get to green? What are you doing to get to green? I might have already asked, how can I support you? I might have asked the tools and resources question. But I don't always turn it around and say to the person, how are you responsible for this? Because isn't it often someone's own stuff that contributes to them having a bad day? I'm working with one hospital right now, and they do lean daily management. And they actually have one of their strategic measures is more joy. I thought that was pretty cool. For somebody who loves engagement, I was happy to see that. They have the quad aim, they have the triple aim that you're familiar with, and then more joy is the fourth one. So I said, well, let's use your Pareto charts and your lean daily management processes, and let's measure. And we used the traffic light check-in. Do you know what was the most exciting thing? This is a telemetry unit that I'm working with. The most exciting thing was we had days where they had their highest acuity, plenty of people floating out or floating in, plenty of admissions. They were green days. We had the exact same data, and they were red days. So we're like, because they're always complaining about staffing and acuity, staffing and acuity. Well, here you have staffing and acuity that's the same as this, but here everybody says they're green, and here they say they're red. What's the difference? So they did more Pareto, the 5 whys. It was the team. Yeah. So instead of all the nurses and the techs and the staff pointing the fingers at the staffing and the acuity, their data, not ours, they gave the answers to the questions. And this was tracked every shift, night shift, day shift, and all charted and on the daily big board and everything. And so when we were in the planning meeting, we were like, yes, this is the best news ever, because staffing and acuity, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. I mean, they're staffed according to the ratio, and it's in line with all the data, and the acuity, well, it's going to be tough because that's what people are in the hospital these days, and so you get the pattern here. But when we found out it was the team, so now we're on step 2, and actually the next step is they're defining kind of those team principles that they want for their unit, and we're working from there. But it all started with asking this traffic light question. Every shift, every day, for 30 days, and you know what else happened? They're called CUCs, clinical unit coordinators. Those were the ones asking the questions. People said that when they saw the CUC coming, they started to think about whether they were satisfied, energized, or productive. Because you know how that goes. If you ask the same questions repetitively, people you train their brain, whether you ask them or not, they're starting to think about it. Oh, am I having a red, a yellow, or green? How come? What could I be doing to get to green? This all happens, as you're approaching them. And that was a nice outcome as well. So if you're already rounding and you can add that traffic light check-in piece to it, maybe you don't like that. Add something to it that is a real-time check of engagement. And you have to do it in words that people will relate to.